Hello dolphins, and welcome to the Second Foot videos by yours truly, Miss Aquad. Now today we're going to talk about human activities and how it affects the environment. So here's my question to you. To be or not to be a good steward of the pediosphere? That is your question. Let's start with our key vocabulary. Our first vocabulary word is remote sensing. Remote sensing is basically the scientific tool that allows us to gather information from a distance. Usually it's on an aircraft or something like a satellite from very far away. Now we're going to move on to our next big information, or our next big vocabulary word, Geographic Information System, also known as GIS. This is not to be confused with GPS. GIS is actually a way to visualize, question, and analyze maps in order to look for trends and patterns. If you take a look at the picture, you can actually see that it's many different maps all in one, and then you can combine them to actually get one map to analyze what's going on. This is great for figuring out what types of soils you have, how to preserve it, and what things are going on in the soil. Are we harming it? How are we harming it? And so on and so forth. So this now brings us to, why is remote sensing, GIS, and other technology tools important, especially with soil? Well, remote sensing and other technologies has allowed humans to better study the human impact on soil quality, erosion processes, so that the soil can be protected and preserved. So by using these tools, we can actually see what's going on with our soil and how we can protect it. This now brings us to a very important question. Soil is a necessary resource. Why is it a necessary resource? It's necessary because, as you remember, we said that soil sustains life for the plants to grow. So basically, these plants provide us with oxygen, food, and shelter. In addition, soil also purifies the water. It also recycles nutrients. If you remember, when we were talking about soil, we talked about how when plants die, they become humus. And when it becomes humus, it starts to decompose. And the microorganisms in the soil help decompose the humus, adding nutrients back to the soil, allowing the plants to grow again. Alright, in the next few slides, we're going to learn about humans and how human activities affect soil. As you can see here, we have our poor little soil who's basically eroding or moving away because us humans sometimes are not the best stewards of the pediosphere. As you can see, they're shooing him away. Oh, poor soil! For this slide, I don't want you to write anything in your notes. I actually have these already typed out for you. I do, however, want you to listen. How does land use affect soil? Well, the land use can affect the levels of nutrients and pollution in the soil. So as we have factories and cars and so on and so forth, we add pollution to the air, and this also gets into our soil. When it gets into the soil, it basically affects the nutrients. The nutrients and the fertility of the soil start to go down. In addition, activities that expose soil to wind and rain can also cause soil loss. So when we're going through construction and development or mining, we are taking away the plant coverage, which is the grass and the trees and the shrubs that actually cover the soil, and we are causing the soil to be lost. There are three main human activities that affect soil. The first one that we're going to talk about is farming. As humans, we sometimes are not the best stewards of our pediosphere. And what I mean by that is we don't take care of our soil. Our first one is farming. Farming has several practices that lead to soil loss. The first one is fertilizers. Fertilizers cause microorganisms to not work properly, to decompose our organic matter, also known as humus. And it also adds to water pollution. If you take a look over at the picture on the right-hand side, you'll see fertilizers were added to the farmland. These fertilizers then got washed away into the lakes and in the streams that were nearby. These streams and lakes then send it to the ocean. Well, this not only hurts the microorganisms, but it can also harm the organisms and the animals that are actually in the streams or in the lakes or oceans. The next one is plowing. Basically, when you plow, you remove plant coverage. When you remove plant coverage, there are not roots to hold down the soil. So again, we're losing soil, which is extremely bad, especially since it takes an extremely long time for soil to come back. It takes at least hundreds to thousands of years to recreate soil. And of course, it's a slow process of weathering. And you guys now know that soil is created by mechanical and chemical weathering. Now, the last one is overgrazing. Overgrazing is basically when farmers allow their animals, such as cows and sheep and goat, to actually eat the plant coverage. When they eat the plant coverage, again, they're removing the grass, which basically has the roots that hold down the soil. And again, it's going to be washed away into roads and streams and lakes and ocean. The second method in which humans harm the soil is construction and development. Again, when you're doing construction and development, they remove the plant coverage. How many of you guys have noticed that I keep using plant coverage? That is one of the big reasons why we are losing soil, is because we remove plants. Now, when we remove the plant coverage, the soil is again unprotected and it can erode away. Now, this can cause rivers, lakes, streams, and oceans nearby to become muddy, harm or kill organisms in these waters, and even cause flooding. If you take a look at the pictures, you can see here's a fish that has died, and then you can also see that again, when construction development occurs, the soil is eroded away, can cause flooding, and so on and so forth, which means it'll get into the streams and water. Now, when it does get into the streams, it can sometimes suffocate the organisms that are in the water. For example, the soil get into the gills of the fish. When they get in the gills of the fish can't breathe anymore. When they can't breathe, they suffocate, they die. Other times, they come so fast that it could actually suffocate an animal by actually drowning them. So it's extremely important that you preserve your soil. The last activity in which humans affect the soil is mining. Again, mining removes plant coverage, which again causes erosion. Again, as you can see, one of the main things that all three of these things do is they remove plant coverage. No plant coverage, no roots to hold down the soil. No roots to hold down the soil, we get lots of erosion. The exposure of the rocks and minerals to the air increases the rate of chemical weathering. Therefore, soil can also be polluted by acid rain, drainage from mines that are exposed to sulfide minerals. If you take a look, there are pictures down at the bottom. You can actually see how they blow up mines, removing the plant coverage, and how the water becomes very polluted. As you can also see, there's on the very right-hand side, sulfuric acid is formed when sulfates react with air and water, again polluting the soil as well as the ground, which affects the plants that are growing nearby, if there are any plants growing nearby. Now I know you're thinking, well, Miss Aquad, we heard how we harm the soil. Is there any way that we can protect and conserve the soil? Well, of course. There are several ways in which we can conserve and protect our soil. So let's go through the next slides and just see how. As we said in some of the slides earlier, soil is a non-renewable resource. That means well-developed soils may take hundreds of thousands of years to form. Therefore, we don't want to waste it. So how are we going to protect the soil? We're going to be good stewards of the pediosphere, and we're going to come up with different ways to preserve the soil. So let's go through some of these. The first thing that we as humans can do to protect our soil and to be good stewards of the pediosphere is to make sure that we don't get rid of our plant or vegetative coverage. Instead, what we should do is plant more trees, flowers, and shrubs everywhere in order for roots to keep the soil in place and prevent soil loss. The second strategy that we could do is crop rotation. Crop rotation is planting different crops on the same field in different years to maintain soil fertility. So, for example, in the first year we plant broccoli. In the second year we plant, instead of broccoli in that area, we plant tomatoes. The third year, we plant carrots. The fourth year, we plant green beans, and so on and so forth. And we just switch it up each year. Now, why would we want to do that? Each type of plant either adds certain nutrients or takes away certain nutrients. So when we switch it off, those nutrients can either be renewed or regenerated or taken away. The third strategy that we as good stewards of the pediosphere could use is by reducing the number of times fields are tilled or plowed in a year. This is called conservation tillage or conservation plowing. Normally what farmers do is when plants die, they just plow it, and then once they plow it, they plant their new seeds. Well, instead, with conservation tillage, they don't plow, they just leave the plants to die, decompose, and then they just plant the new seeds inside the dead, decomposing humus. The next conservation strategy that we'll be talking about is terraces. Terraces are flat, step-like areas built on hillsides or even mountains to hold rainwater and prevent it from running downhill. You guys already have the perfect connection of this because in social studies, you guys learned about the Incans and how they developed highly advanced terracing and irrigation methods to allow farming in difficult mountain terrain. The next conservation strategy that we'll be talking about is contour plowing. Contour plowing is basically the practice of plowing along the curves or the contours of a slope. So why is this great? It's great because rainwater will not carry the soil straight down the fields. Instead, it gets stuck in the curves, which means that the soil will not be eroded quite as quickly. The final conservation strategy that we're going to be talking about today is windbreaks. Windbreaks is basically just like it sounds. It's where you plant rows of trees in order to break or reduce the force of winds that can carry off the soil. Now that you have learned about how the humans can be bad stewards or good stewards to the pediosphere, I want you to answer the following 3 questions. Please use the notes that you just completed in order to answer these questions. We will discuss these questions tomorrow in class.